There can be only one.
Hello, Contrarians, listeners, watchers, and subscribers. Here we are with a very, very special episode, a very special QVR. And this time, more than ever, I think the Q is definitely not going to stand for quick. I think officially we're making the jump to quantum QVR on this one because they're already long when it's just Alex and I. This time, our friend, if you've listened to the show, you know he's also the man behind our videos. Cory, R.E. Nerdscum, he's here. To basically take part of something that he requested / demanded. He said, you guys need to do Highlander, mainly because I don't know when, at some point, Alex, I admitted that I still hadn't watched Highlander. And Cory has watched it enough for all of Texas by now. So I haven't seen Highlander. Cory has seen it 100 times. The real question is you, Alex. How many times have you seen Highlander, if any?
I know I watched it either in high school or college once, but I haven't seen it as many times as I should, so I'm excited about this revisit.
Okay, how much do you remember of it?
I mean, I remember the basic story of it. I couldn't quote it. I know there's a wrestling tie-in too, so I'll be excited
of course.
to talk about that. Yeah.
I'm not going to let either of you spoil it for me. I know I have some ideas. I know the basic stuff. At least I think I know the basic stuff. There's a bunch of Highlanders. Every time one of them dies, the power of the Highlander, of that, the one that dies, gets distributed among the ones that are surviving, right? And that's why they're killing each other, because the last one standing is going to have all the power. That's, I think, there can be only one. Do they have a catchphrase? I think they have a catchphrase.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a catchphrase, but as much as I hate to be that guy, that's why I'm here. Technically, only the ones who are from the Highlands of Scotland are Highlanders. The rest of them are just immortals.
Okay, well, which brings me to my next thing that I know. I know Sean Connery is in this movie, and I am 99% sure he's playing somebody from Spain. Does that mean that he's not a Highlander?
He is not only not a Highlander, he's not from Spain. He's actually an ancient Egyptian, but we'll get into that.
Even more ridiculous than I expected. And then this is a big one. I mean, it sucks. I'm spoiled. That's like, and it's on me for taking so long. I know that he dies because I know he comes back in the second one, and people are like, how did he come back on the second one? So watching this movie, I'm just going to be waiting for Sean Connery to die, which is just, that is the curse of coming in late. I don't know. I'll tell you once we go through the movie. I'll tell you if I think it would have surprised me anyway. But I know those are the three things. Oh, and I know there was a TV show about Highlander. Actually, Cory and I were messaging about this throughout the day. And that does not star the guy from this movie. It's about a different Highlander. Lambert. Yeah, Raiden.
Sorry.
Right. Yeah. I posted on social media. I really look forward to, when this is over, not thinking of Christopher Lambert as Raiden. I'm going to think of him as whatever he is in this one, as a Highlander. But
he's also the guy that drives Sean William Scott to the ground of apocalypse in Southland Tales.
Southland Tales. Yeah.
Get the fuck out of my ice cream truck, you Cro-Magnon bitch.
And also, when you're done with this movie, you will know exactly why they cast him as Raiden.
Okay. Now I'm looking forward to him shooting lightning or something, so we'll see. All right, that's what I know. Everything else, I expect it to be rated R. That's my last bit of Highlander trivia before we get started. I could have watched Highlander when I was a kid. It was like a big premiere on Peruvian TV. And I was getting ready. My parents weren't having dinner or something. And then the TV station put up that warning. Warning, this is for 18 and up. This is very graphic. Do not let your children watch it. So my mom turned it off. And that was it. Because of that, I just did not watch Highlander for decades. So we'll see.
I literally remember this movie like as long as I've been alive.
I know it's one of my old man's favorites.
Oh,
he talks about this movie a lot. Yeah, Cory, can you explain to us the cut we're going to be watching here this evening?
Yes.
Yes. So initially, when the movie came out, they had the version essentially the version we're going to be watching tonight, which was like the 116-minute cut. And that's what was released around most of the world with minor trims. But here in the States, on top of having to cut things for MPAA to get an R rating, they also, the Canon, the distributors, decided that there were some things in the movie that felt a little silly to them. So they thought they would cut that kind of stuff, as well as there's several very expensive flashback sequences where they were just like, we don't see why this is in the movie. And we want to fill as many theater slots, like as time slots as possible at the theater. So we're going to cut this down as much as possible.
Of course.
So what we have here is either the director's cut, which if they've taken it from the DVD rip, it is basically the original cut, but some scenes you'll notice a slight degradation in the quality of the visual. But if it's the European cut, then it's been completely remastered for the Blu-ray they put out a couple of years ago.
Alex, are you doing Prime or YouTube?
Prime is what I was fixing to do. Is it? What do you mean YouTube? Is it like on YouTube TV or what?
No, it's on YouTube rental, and it says 4K. Yeah. I think the one on Prime might also say 4K, which makes me think that it's probably the remastered one.
Yeah,
so we'll see. We'll see. All right. So an hour 56 means that we're gonna watch. What do you think? An hour?
Yeah, I think we can call it an hour.
All right. Yeah. In an hour, we'll be back, and we'll see if Sean Connery is still alive, and how I feel about Christopher Lambert. Lots of things to ponder in an hour. But we'll come back, and then Cory will inundate us with trivia about what changes from the theatrical to this cut, and what exactly am I not getting if I'm not enchanted. 1 hour in, I should be all into this movie, right? I mean,
yeah, if I remember about what happens at by the hour mark, you should, by that point, you should know if you're on board or not.
Okay. All right, cool. So
Clancy Brown's in this too. Hank from Detroit Become Human, that video game that I was fucking nuts about. So.
He's Mr. Krabs.
He's the guy that the head lynch mob guy from the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. That's really
again another movie that I had to watch for this thing.
Why is that your point of reference for Clancy Brown? Holy crap!
Blocked it out of my head.
It irritates Alex. That's why.
I'm so glad we're watching this movie.
All right. So we'll be back in an hour, and we'll have lots to talk about.
Because you were born different, men will fear you, try to drive you away. Highlander, there can be only one.
Here we are, with the princes of the universe.
All right, we are back pretty much an hour on the dot on our Highlander watch for me, rewatch for Alex, rewatch for Cory. And it was almost like it was destiny. Like it happened almost at the hour mark, assuming that we're all watching the same movie and we all looked at the same time code. It was like Sean Connery in and out. He's gone. I mean, I'm assuming we're not going to see him again, but I don't know. Maybe there's another flashback I'm missing where they're going to pick up his head. Or oh, here he is. It's
going to say, okay, pendejo. Let me see what kind of swordsman you've become.
Dude, his one Spanish word in the entire movie, I'm assuming. It was... I looked it up. It's 37 minutes. I was like, how long am I going to wait for Sean Connery to show up? I was like, I know that he got the end credit, but they make us wait for him. And
he's easily, at the time, and still the biggest name in this film. Besides Michael P.S. Hayes and Bam Bam Terry Gordy in the beginning there.
I was going to ask, so those were real wrestlers at the beginning?
Oh, yeah. Terry Gordy's a legitimate all-time great. And the Freebirds, the trio that comes out there in the beginning with the red, white, and blue, the very problematic ring gear they're wearing, they're in the WWE Hall of Fame, and they're recognized as greats. I can tell you, they're actually also depicted in the Iron Claw. The three of them, they're the Von Erichs rivals in real life in that movie. Yeah. It did not actually happen in Madison Square Garden. I knew this because I believe the promotion would have been the AWA, and they never ran Madison Square Garden. But the shots of that are awesome. That like it's not a crane shot, whatever the tracking shot is that they have coming in and by the ring. But it is the closing of the opening is at Madison Square Garden. That awesome one shot of fucking just Nash peeling out through the parking garage and then coming up to the street and the cops waiting for him. I was very into what was happening and then just continued to be into what was happening.
Yeah, when it comes to that opening sequence, so it's actually like a milestone for filmmaking where the director and someone on the film went to some event and they saw the little blimp that had the camera on it that goes around the stadium and films people for like basketball games. And so basically they ended up being like the first film that employed that for that shot going around like the audience and stuff.
That's awesome.
And I also have to say the shot of the little girl licking her lips when Homie takes his robe off always creeps me out.
Yeah. I don't think Michael Hayes was above that back in the day. You know?
Well, even before we get to the wrestling, I was not expecting wrestling. I was definitely not expecting. That was Queen, right? The opening song.
Yes. Queen does. There's more than 4 Queen songs on the soundtrack, but Queen specifically recorded 4 songs for this movie. They were supposed to do one song for the movie, and then they watched the rough cut, and basically each member of the band picked their favorite scene or character and wrote a theme for that. But they also do a really great cover of Liza Minnelli's New York, New York for the soundtrack, which she's never allowed to be re-released.
Yeah, I guess they're fans. I just didn't know. I was expecting kind of like instrumental period appropriate music, and then instead I got hit with rock and roll in a way, a rock anthem. It was it really made me think of Flash Gordon. That's Queen too, right? Like yeah. That's it was the 80s. The 80s is wild. That's like my main thought so far. An hour into the movie is like, this is so 80s. And if I had been actually able to watch this movie on that fateful night when my parents turned the TV off, I think I would have loved the hell out of it. Watching it as an adult, I just keep thinking stuff. I was like, why are they using swords? Why aren't they using guns? Is it because it only works if you cut the head off? I mean, can't you shoot him and then cut the head off? What's the deal with Lambert's accent? Give me an answer for that. Is it just that he's moved throughout the world so much that he's adopted accents from like all over?
He's been alive for centuries, man. His accent's bound to warp in some way.
That is the logic that they put into it, yes. However, an interesting tidbit on top of that, when Christopher Lambert was cast in this movie, he did not speak English. So he's learning English as he's making the movie, and at least half the movie is filmed with him just memorizing the dialogue phonetically and having a loose understanding of what it means. However, having said that, nothing on the face of this planet will ever be cooler than him saying there can be only one.
Well, I don't know. I think, what's his name from Nightmare on Elm Street would disagree. Because he's from
a lot of other things, dude. You need to quit citing that.
No, sure. Hold on, wait. I planned for this. I've got notes. Okay, just give me 1 second here. Okay, and we'll move on. I promise. Okay, here we go, Julio. We're gonna give you options right now. All right, The Bride with Sting, Buckaroo Banzai. He's in that. Pathfinder with Carl Urban. Flubber with Robin Williams. The Flash TV show. The most recent one, not the one from the 90s. Thor Ragnarok. I don't remember him in that.
I don't either.
There somewhere. Bad Boys. The one with Sean Penn, not the one with Will Smith. Lost. Of course, SpongeBob as Mr. Krabs. Shawshank Redemption. Starship Troopers. John Wick, and 273 other things.
The main one I remember is he did a voice on Gargoyles, and he played Lex Luthor. Also, he voiced Lex Luthor in a Batman Superman movie.
Not just that, in the the majority of the Justice League animated series and Justice League Unlimited, which is like the best interpretation of those characters ever.
Well, there you go, Julio. No excuses now.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
His
Clancy
Lex Luthor
Brown,
is-
Lex Luthor, sure.
President. Foolish, faceless man. My campaign is a farce. President. Do you know how much power I'd have to give up to be president? That's right. I spent $75 million on a fake presidential campaign. All just to tick Superman off.
What's his name here? The Killjoy?
The Kurgan.
The Kurgan. Okay, yeah. He's young. This is the youngest Clancy Brown I've ever seen.
Definitely.
And he looks menacing.
He still looks old.
Yes. He's on stilts, right? He's not that tall. Or is
I mean,
everybody else?
shooting him with low angle lenses and with what do you call it? Like widescreen refractor images, which like will stretch the shot out to make him look bigger.
Yeah.
He's tall as shit, though, dude. He's a big dude.
He towers over everybody, and it made me question if I just didn't know that Christopher Lambert was like really short, because Lambert is not towering over anyone, even when he's with his people, his clansmen in the flashbacks.
Yeah,
he's not. He doesn't look athletic to where I would be like, oh, this guy's gonna kick ass. He looks kind of schlubby, especially in the present, which makes it kind of. I don't know how he wins this fight, but I'm assuming that at some point he's going to absorb more electricity. And I gotta tell you guys, I'm watching this. That's another thought I had. I'm like, they give you the opening text, giving you some pointers, and then I have the advantage of knowing kind of like what's going on, because it's like pop culture. And like I said in the previous segment, I kind of like have an idea that when they kill one, they absorb the power. That seems to be happening. Like, what's happening when you're watching this in the 80s and you don't know that? It's not part of it. Like, are you confused? Like, are you just scratching your head until Sean Connery shows up and kind of explains some things? Because I still like, that's the thing, but that's all he says.
There's this movie from the late 70s called Star Wars, right? And people who went and saw that opening weekend, I think, didn't quite grasp what was going on, but enjoyed it.
Yes, but even in Star Wars, that's a great example, because it has a moment like the one that Sean Connery has here. Like Obi-Wan might be like 20 minutes into the movie, if not like sooner. He sits down and he lays down the basics for Luke. It's like, there's the Force, here's the lightsabers, your dad, he died, so on. Like here, we don't know. Nobody's giving anybody answers. It's just like Christopher Lambert's like fighting for his life.
But like, something, again, I know this is a lot harder for you to do than myself, and
like,
can you imagine like going to see this movie in 1986 and knowing nothing about it, and you're like in the movie theater, which was like a big thing in the 80s, and like a screen that's bigger than what you can afford or like have ever seen in your life, and all those huge like aerial shots of them training and fighting on the mountaintops of Scotland and shit, like that's I can put myself there, and it seems that you can't. I'm like, holy shit, this shit would have been mind-blowing at the time.
Well, no, I'll tell you this also. I think that once Connery shows up, nothing else matters, because Connery is great. I think that once he shows up, the movie becomes like a real movie. Like I trust the movie, which worries me because he's already gone. So the second half of the movie is Connery-less. And I thought that we were going to see him in present day. I thought we were going to see his introduction. He was going to disappear. And then when we come back, he was going to show up and he was going to be dressed like, I don't know, leather jacket or something. It's not going to happen. Cory,
he's one of the cops.
Yes, there you go.
Part 2 where that happens.
Oh, God.
No. That's the reason they brought him back, but you don't have to worry. He served his function in terms of the narrative for this movie. So,
I
even when he's not there, you'll feel him there.
Oh, there you go. This is for Ramirez when he finally kills him. So, Cory, I mean, you've seen this plenty of times. You know the story and the mythology forwards and backwards. So you've seen the sequels, all that stuff. But do you remember? When you first watched it, like, were you confused at all, or were you just kind of like with Alex, where he was like, "This is great, I'm just going with the flow"?
I mean, like, again, I don't remember the first time I watched it, because this is probably like a movie that my dad had on either Betamax or VHS when I was like 2 or 3. But I do remember as like a young kid watching the movie, and I never really questioned anything. I was just so engrossed by what was happening that I was there for it. But you also have to keep in mind that, like, at 3, my favorite movie was Creepshow until Tim Burton's Batman came out, you know? But no, yeah, like, as a kid, it didn't really confuse me. But also, like, Die Hard 2, the introduction of, what's his name, who was the villain in that movie, is literally just them ripping off the Kurgan from this movie.
I don't know the actor, but it's the guy we see him naked at the beginning. That's
He's also in Shawshank Redemption, and he's the Reaper in Bill and Ted. I wish I could remember his name. I knew it while we were in between. But anyway, yeah, that's just like a rip off of that. So like, there are so many things that we take for granted as like a part of our kind of like action movie visual language that take a lot from things that they're doing on this movie, where they took a lot of big chances, you know. And sometimes it's really silly.
William Sadler was the dude's name.
Well, yes, William Sadler. He really is a great actor. I would feel bad that I can't remember his name.
What you're describing is very similar to my experience with Terminator 2. Obviously, not here to compare the two movies, but just what you were explaining about a movie your dad had, and I just watched as a kid, and like just absorbed it and was like, holy shit, you know. For that movie, like, always burned into my brain, one of my first memories of film is when Arnold cuts his arm and rips it off and shows the exoskeleton. I also just realized that I have my Terry Bam Bam Gordy figure right here, so that's it's on display with my other, because his biggest run was in Japan, so he's with all my Japanese wrestling stuff. Julio, something I always find interesting in movies like this is when they do try to approach the notion of immortality from a human perspective of, you know, he's in love here, and Heather, I think's her name, and Sean Connery is just like, you can't do it. You can't have children, you know. He tells him you have to split it off, and he explains he had a wife that, you know, 500 years ago or whatever. And any of that part of the story engrossing to you? Because I think it's so ridiculous, you know, the idea of like trying to humanize someone who's immortal, but it is like a real like, that's part of the premise of Groundhog's Day. There's that sequence where he tries to kill himself over and over again because he doesn't like the idea of like this immortality window. But any of that compelling to you?
I think that the overall, like the pitch, like the concept is, I actually find it very compelling. I think that might be the way that you get me to watch and enjoy this type of movie. As far as, you know, the director, because I saw him pop up, and it's like, that name sounds very familiar. And yeah, it's the guy that directed Ricochet. That's how we got here. Because during the Ricochet warm-up, probably, you read it.
You're right.
Yeah. And so with Ricochet, I couldn't stop myself from like thinking to where I could enjoy the plot. And
you couldn't start yourself having fun was the problem.
Right. I don't have the problem here, though. And I think that you have to put that like fantasy coat on it, like fantasy or sci-fi. Like, I think if you give me permission, or you give me like a tiny reason where I can just go like, well, it's not the real world, so I can just go with it a little more easily. Like, it doesn't mean that the questions are not in my head. Like, I'm like, when do they stop aging? Why is it that Sean Connery looks much older than both Lambert and Clancy Brown, right? Like, what determines when you stop aging if you never die?
But you don't have to deal with the idea of like, Christopher Lambert's not an elected official like in an election, like, you know, Denzel is in Ricochet.
But I do actually have answers to those questions.
Are those answers like that you came up with, or answers that the movies?
No, it's not an answer that's given in this movie, but as you explore like the extended mythology, like, it's made more clear later. First off, keep in mind also that like when this movie came out and they were doing the whole exploration of what it is to be immortal, there was no Interview with a Vampire yet, at least not in movie form, you know? Like, there weren't a lot of movies dealing with that. So that, again, would have been something that at the time was kind of new and engaging. But in terms of the age of the immortal, an immortal is born as an immortal, and they will age throughout their life until they die a violent death, at which point their immortality is triggered. and they essentially stay that age for the rest of their existence, which is something that like later properties have had a lot of fun playing with, even us getting like little kids who were immortals, you know.
That's awesome. It's a damn shame that it's not in this movie.
Yeah.
But you were asking me about the romance, and I mean, I thought that was okay. I'm invested in the bromance, Alex. The Connery Lambert like relationship. That's when the movie really hooked me, especially because they ask a question that now I guess we're not gonna have an answer to, which is like, if it's the two of us at the end, are you gonna be able to kill me? And I was like, holy shit, is that what's going to happen? I thought maybe that's what, you know, the climax was going to be. It was like, it's going to be the two of them, and Connery is going to be like, oh, I'm going for you. And then Lambert's going to come on top. But that's not going to be it. So I wanted the answer to that question.
No, that's Highlander Endgame, where it's both the McLeod boys, and they play that out in that movie.
Okay, not Conor McGregor. Because Conor McLeod and Conor McGregor would be an amazing fight.
They would have to use some.
People were interesting.
Yeah, that's when they'd have to bring in stilts for him to wear to be like the height of these actors here.
Absolutely. I think one of the reasons why this movie works is because, as silly and outlandish as some of the ideas are, all of the characters outside of the villain are like so human to a fault. It really does help you engage with and like relate with them on like an emotional level, so you can invest in their story and kind of go along with all the like hero's journey first half of the movie.
Yeah,
like, that's basically what we're through now, and now we're going to get into like the plot. Everything's been setting up.
I look forward to the who is it? She's in forensics, right? The cop that's in forensics. I look forward to her having something to do in this movie. They've certainly given us enough scenes to where I'm like, she's obviously going to play a part. Hopefully that part is not just her being kidnapped and then Lambert is going to have to rescue her. And that's how he gets to fight with Clancy Brown again.
I mean, it's not a Spider-Man movie, but you're not completely wrong.
It's the 80s. I mean, I know I've seen enough 80s movies. I know how the tropes go. And this movie is still, you know, for all the ground.
It sounds like you're enjoying yourself more than Invasion USA, though.
Fuck. Yes. I don't think Christopher Lambert is, at least based on this movie, I don't know that he is what I would call a charismatic lead, especially when you have Sean Connery coming in and just basically stealing the movie from him for like 20 minutes or so. But he can carry the movie in a way that Chuck Norris didn't, in my humble opinion.
Well, I mean, he can actually act, so that's helpful. And on top of that, like, while Connery's far more charismatic, again, he's playing like the mentor character that needs that. Whereas, like, most of the movie, if you've noticed with the lighting and stuff, they're evoking more of like a noir, kind of hard-boiled lead character who's just all about suffering and tragedy. And, like, you know, like, I'm surprised that most of the movie's just not him drinking whiskey and smoking cigarettes, like, bitching about the past in 1942. You know.
All right. Well, yes, I'm enjoying myself. I think that this is going well. Like I said, I'm not loving it in the way that I don't think that I can love this movie the way that I would have loved it when I was a kid, if that was my first exposure for it. I totally get the attachment that anybody can have to it if you grew up and you watched it at the right time. I'm coming into it late, but I'm not having a bad time, which, you know, could happen with some of these older movies. So I'm assuming my predictions for the second half, the big climax is going to be McLeod. What's his name in the McLeod? But what's his Connor? Yeah. Connor is going to avenge Connery and I guess his wife from back then, and gonna kill Clancy Brown. Gonna chop his head off. It's gonna be the last of him. I imagine that on the way there, we have to see at least one more immortal. There's no way that we only had like the one at the beginning. So one more maybe. And man, I hope they give something to do to that other cop, the older guy that seems to be. He's a good actor. Like all the other cops were kind of, you know, very stilted and very like, I'm gonna be evil.
That was New Jersey being New Jersey.
Yeah,
all these character actors know their jobs and are doing them well.
Yeah, yeah. He seems like like he could do more. If they give him more, he's gonna do something else. But again, I know it's the '80s, so his character's probably there just to, you know, help us with the transitions. And that's it. I don't think the woman, what is her name? I looked it up. Sarah. I don't know, the forensic person. I don't think she's gonna die. If it was in '90s, I think she would die. In the '80s, I think she makes it so that she can maybe be Connor's girlfriend by the end of the movie. Alex, were you surprised at how much you remembered, or surprised at how much you didn't remember while watching this?
Somewhere in the middle. I mean, this is a movie, once you've seen it and you like know the plot, like a lot of that's there. It's way more visually impressive than I remember it being, though. So that's like the big thing thus far. It's an 80s movie, yes, in plot, but very visually impressive.
Okay. Well, let's go finish the movie. When we come back, Cory's going to break down what the difference is between the theatrical and what we just watched, because I am curious. And then, we'll actually talk about the movie as a whole and give those damn ratings. We've got to reduce the movie to just a numeric or a letter grade. But we'll be back in about 50 minutes or so.
Because you were born different, men will fear you, try to drive you away.
I am Connor MacLeod. I am immortal. There can be only one.
We are back. We finished Highlander. It was, and this is not necessarily a bad thing, but it was exactly what I expected the climax to be. I'm not even going to pat myself on the back for calling the fact that, what is her name? It's not Rachel. It's Brenda. Brenda got kidnapped so that he would go and fight. I have so many questions.
Massive apartment she's got, too. When he's chasing her through it, I'm like, good God, man. How can she afford this place?
It's because she's such a great cook.
Yeah.
The book, too, I'm sure the royalties. But it's like, she likes to cook, so she hosts big dinner parties. That was my takeaway. I have a lot of questions. That
I do love that was like the most unrealistic part of the movie, apparently, or the part that Alex felt the need to question. So,
yes.
Okay, lots of questions.
I do. And they were just like, that's just me overthinking a movie that doesn't want me to think about these things. It doesn't get in the way. Only one thing has gotten in the way of my enjoyment, and we'll get to it in a minute. But as far as like the logistics, and it's not going to surprise me if you tell me that this gets answered / explored in future installments of the series. Is this thing optional? Is the gathering optional? Because they make it sound like it's not. They make it sound like that's their destiny. They're all going towards this point in time where they're all going to have to kill each other until there's only one. But then Connor meets with like this other Highlander, and they just go for drinks. Like, are we gonna fight? No, let's get drunk instead.
Well,
so you don't
the good
have
guys and the bad guys, you know.
So you can choose to not do the gathering.
It's not a matter of if you can choose to participate in the gathering, but you can choose who you decide to fight against. And again, like if it had come down to that guy, as Connor asked Ramirez earlier in the movie,
right?
Like if it had come down to those two guys, yeah, they would have had to fight. But one of the reasons, like that guy probably said, "Let's throw a party," is because he knew he wasn't making it to the final round.
Okay, so that's my other question. Are you allowed to team up? Like they know that Clancy Brown is probably the worst of the worst, so would it make sense for them to team up against him? But then after he's dead, they're like, all right, well.
Technically, according to the rules that are established later, no. But, so yeah, technically, you're not allowed to team up. It has to be one-on-one. There are, like, specific rules, and we only hear a couple of them in this movie. But eventually, whenever they wanted to expand the series, they have to actually try to make, like, a world that works with these people in it. And in doing so, yeah, it's like there is an element of honor or supposed to be an element of honor to the game, as it's called. And while everyone is drawn to the quickening, there are actually some immortals who become monks and stuff like that because you can't fight on holy ground. And some immortals like chastise them as cowards, whereas others like respect them for the choice to be non-violent after everything they've seen and all the trauma they've gone through.
Right. But this is all down the line mythology, like
yeah,
what
way
Connor-
down
when
the
you-
line mythology. So in terms of this movie and what we see, what I would tell you is what I originally said. We're like, yeah, no, everybody's got to fight, but you don't necessarily have to fight your friend unless there's no one else to fight.
Okay. My final question before we start talking about the movie and not like what was going on in my brain. So the quickening is when they get the energy, like they get the lighting and all that stuff, right? Why did Connor get the quickening the first time he met Sean Connery? Because he didn't kill anybody, but he gets the lightning and gets all that stuff.
Technically, the quickening is just the term for an exchange of energy between immortals. And the quickening is also referred to as the energy that immortals carry within them. So yeah, basically, like when you're in proximity to another immortal, you will get the quickening, as in like an exchange of energy between the two of you,
like static shock. Just
Yeah.
yeah. But then also, if you cut one of these motherfuckers' heads off, then you're going to take all of it, and have like a big orgasmic electro like dubstep party.
Alex, did you remember that Connor becomes God at the end of the movie?
Not in those specific words, no. I remember he wins, and I didn't remember that Clancy Brown goes like full Leatherface there during that fight scene where he's just like spinning in a circle with the sword. I thought he was trying to knock the sign down. I think that's kind of what the idea is, but I did not remember, and it shouldn't be surprising, the shot of Clancy Brown leaving that hotel when he's like walking. That's like literally the shot of Arnold walking through the police station in Terminator. Like it's just like exactly that. And a lot of movies were trying to be Terminator at this point in time, and that's not a bad thing because Terminator made a lot of money and made a big impact. This movie's not trying to be Terminator, but that shot, I was just like, oh, it's Arnold walking through the police station.
Yeah, there's clearly influences there, for
Well,
sure.
if we're talking about echoes, once we got to the big final fight in the rooftop / like scaffolding, whatever's happening.
Empire Records sign.
Yeah, well, that's Ricochet, right? Like the first part of it. Did you think about it? Like
I didn't
Denzel
even
and
put those together, but yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, I had to because it's the same director. So it was like, oh, he likes heights.
More so though, it is the climax of Madam Web, where literally even the S letter crashes down on one of the characters in the exact same shot that is in that sequence.
Well, like you said, you have to. Everything is a copy of a copy of a copy, so you just have to honor the past.
Clancy Brown quoting Neil Young in a church. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is my favorite scene in this movie.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it's my favorite scene in this movie, and it's also the scene that cements Clancy Brown in like my top 3 movie villains of all time.
Clancy
It's,
Brown.
So
very
badass and so pathetic all at the same time that it's just remarkable.
He reminded me, finally, because we get to see him in a lot more in his leather persona in the second half. It clicked. He reminds me of Griff from Back to the Future 2.
Yeah.
But if Griff was played by Jake Busey. but with a meaner strike.
Yeah.
Forget about the comedy and just like he's
Yeah.
a real dick, and that would be it. And it works. He makes it work. I mean, it's like nothing against Jake Busey, but obviously Clancy Brown can pull off menacing and
He's a
funny at
bad
the same
dude
time.
here.
Yeah, no, he's the worst.
Father, forgive me. I am a worm. I have something to say. It's better to burn out than to fade away.
We're talking about the best scenes. It's funny because I kind of like shrugged off the romance in the previous segment. I like, oh, you care about the. I was like, no, I care about the bromance. But really, I think the most moving scene for me was him saying goodbye to his wife, who actually died of old age. That was, even though I was not particularly invested in that relationship, I think that because the idea of like a man that doesn't grow old and watches the woman he loves grow old, and then they have this really bittersweet goodbye. I mean, that was like, man, it's not like I was blown away by Lambert's performance, but it works because I think at the center there's a pretty solid idea. I did not expect it to go there, and in fact, I'm a lot more mixed on the second half because I kept seeing things that I was like, well, I wish they'd done more of this, right? I really like the flashback of him in, World War II, when he rescues the girl that turns out to be his receptionist. I was like, that is an awesome relationship that gets 2 scenes in this movie. Like, one more of that, right? We lost Connery, so I wish we had then this other character as the kind of like picking up the torch and really being that other person that has seen him grow older. And, you know, she's not a mentor, but she is somebody that he can confide in. Like, I care about that a lot more than I care about the kind of out of nowhere romance that he has with Brenda.
Yeah.
It's like, cook for me. Now stab me. Now let's have sex.
That sex scene was also very Terminator-esque in the profile.
I've got to say, like, watching a movie from the 80s, you would think people had sex differently, because anyone who has watching one of these movies is like, that's not how that works.
That angle doesn't make any sense. But before I forget, when he says goodbye to Heather, that's during the sequence of Who Wants to Live Forever by Queen playing. One of the great final jokes in Eastbound and Down is the series finale, when it's the closing montage of how Kenny's life turns out. That song is the one that plays over the montage.
Yeah. Both sequences use that song very effectively and completely
agreed.
Yeah, Quinn took over the soundtrack in the second half, because they had that and they had the. I'm sure I would have noticed too, Cory, if you hadn't mentioned it, but they're doing the cover of New York, New York.
Yeah.
While he's driving like a madman. That sequence is wild. That was really good. So for me, it's a toss up between really like his goodbye to his wife, and then his goodbye to Rachel, to the woman that, you know, the little girl that he rescued. Like, I thought that was also cool. Like, that was emotional. I get it. You know, this is an action movie. It's really about, like, we can't spend too much time on this because we got to get to the next sword fight. But there's part of me that's like,
it's a magic trick. It's the first thing and the last
dude,
thing.
Like, I'm not crazy about his performance, but he kind of nailed that delivery.
Like that's the elevator, like the gates closing and stuff. And what's really crazy is, like, it's not just us three. Like, everybody gets to that moment in this movie, and they're invested in that. But if you stop a moment and think about it, it's a man who rescued her when she was a little girl. And from their body language, it's very much implied at some point they were romantically involved.
I kept myself from thinking about that.
The Highlander is the greatest groomer that has ever existed, is all I'm saying.
Good God, man.
I did not see. I was like, please don't kiss. And they didn't. They hugged. And I was like, all right, I can tell myself that this was platonic the entire time.
Hey, man, for 1986, they walked that line like a motherfucker.
It's true. Julio, I don't mean to move ahead, but I think now's the time we learn what the difference between this and the 1 hour and 51 minute version is.
Well, as a lead into that, I do have the one thing that bothered me, and I know it's the 80s, and therefore in full 80s mode we have, like, it's the trope of, like, sexual assault is gonna be like a plot point that just kind of like leads to, but the way that they handle it is just so weird, because so I'd assumed that his wife was dead, because the last thing we see is, like, the hand grabbing her. And then we get the flashbacks when he's thinking about her. And I was like, wait, is this the past? Because they're looking at, like, a destroyed house, right? But there is no reference about, like, You know, it's like, if you don't show me anything, then my assumption is like, oh, well, he got back, everything was destroyed, and then he just moved on with his life. But if you proceed to show me kind of like, oh, they rebuilt their lives and they, you know, she grew old, I was like, wait, but what happened? Like, what was the conversation when he got there? And, you know, it's like, what happened to Sean Connery? Why didn't he go like looking for vengeance? Or, you know, it's like, it created a lot of questions. And it also makes me think, okay, well, we saw the hand grabbing her, and now she's alive. So obviously he didn't kill her, but he has to have done something. And because the movie's not being explicit, I was like, oh, they're going to save this to deploy it at some point. It's going to be like, he's going to say it. And he did. And to the movie's credit, it actually worked, because I thought it was just going to be pretty gratuitous. But instead, it's just, I think because he reveals it as in like, he's saying it, speaking as if he was speaking of Sean Connery's wife, you know, and that extra turn that was like, oh, wait, she was your wife and you didn't know. I mean, I think it adds an extra dimension that makes it. But at the same time, like, I'm thinking, we already knew this guy was bad news. You know, he was a son of a bitch. Like, if you don't have sexual assault thrown in the mix, it still works, right? She should have just run away. And then he comes back and she's hiding in the cave or something.
Yeah, I mean, I will give them that it's 1986, and for what it's worth, on the commentary, it does come up that they were encouraged to film the assault scene.
Oh, God.
And pretty much everyone who wasn't part of canon was like, yeah, we don't need that. That's like, it is unfortunate that it is a part of the narrative, but there at least was some concept of them being like, yeah, no, we don't need to see that.
He's already established as like somebody that you want to see die. So there really is nothing. Yeah. And there's already so much. Like
they have a line where they say that his people used to throw children to hungry dogs for fun. So he's the bad guy.
Well, but I was also gonna say, because I messaged Cory at some point, and I was like, we were kind of like checking in which part of the movie we were in, and I said, well, Brenda is doing her best to get a hold of a plot line, and that's, you know, you have Brenda, you have Heather. Those are really the two big. Rachel gets like, you know, she might be my favorite character woman in the movie, but she is, you know, she doesn't get anything. And so you already kind of, Brenda gets to do nothing in the end but just hook up with him. And and then Heather is mostly a victim. And so I don't think that you needed to like even double down on like, and now we're going to show you like the full torture. You know, so I am curious, like, was it that I think that is a good lead in into the differences, like, as far as like, was that something that was added or cut in, like, you know, cut out in the switch from theatrical to like the director's cut? And then what else didn't make it, or what else was added? Because I know you mentioned something about the seeing the heads actually getting chopped off, which you definitely see in this cut. Everybody, you get to see the clean cut, and the head like rolling off.
Okay, yeah. Like, no, they never filmed that scene. It was nothing that was ever scripted, the actual assault scene. It was just something that was suggested when they were looking for money to make the movie, because it would be an excuse to get more nudity into the movie. And, again, luckily, you know, the director and even Sean Connery, you know, who has said that, you know, sometimes it's all right to slap a woman if she gets out of line. Even he was like, we don't need that in this movie. So it was just never done. It was like a line in the sand that they drew, and luckily, you know, the Cannon boys never pushed it too far. They had plenty of other movies like that they could fall back on. But so, transitioning from that, you know, like, most of the cuts in the movie are little things, like in terms of violence. So yeah, they're like in the theatrical cut in the US, like, you don't see Sean Connery's head come off or like his body hit the stairs or any of that stuff. You see the strike, and then they cut to like the Kurgan's face. So little differences are things like, let's see here. So in the opening, the chant of "Kill the McLeod" that we hear in that first battle sequence was cut from the theatrical cut. Also, a few minutes of that fight in general were cut out of the movie. But the things that kind of show that it's like Connor's first battle and stuff like that, they just kind of throw you into the battle more so. You don't get to see the thing with his girlfriend. They don't really establish that hard, but the girl who wishes him luck and then turns on him.
Turns on him on a dime.
Burn
him.
Yeah. Burn him.
There's that awesome shot in the battle, by the way, when that's when he says it out loud. Nobody wants to fight me, and he's doing the Bruce Willis in Unbreakable. It's like, anybody touch me, please.
There's for what it's worth, there's a lot of lines in this movie that I still remember on a regular basis. Like anytime I'm not feeling good and anyone's ever said, "Can you walk?" in my head, I've gone, "I'll bloody well walk out of here."
And you walk. I'll bloody well walk out of here.
You know, or just like the moment where he's training with Sean Connery and like Heather laughs at him and he's like, "Heather, please."
Heather, please.
You know, there are just these little lines where it's like there's nothing really special about the line, but something about like that moment and the delivery just rings, you know? Okay, so yeah, like they highly reduced both the wrestling footage and the actual battle that it leads into, as well as like all the audio that leads into it, so it was more of like a hard cut. The next thing is up in the garage down below. They trimmed out the shot of the full head coming off, as well as all of the Power Ranger flips that old man does. Because they were like, "That's silly, we're not putting that in. No, that's dumb, we're not doing it." It is silly.
It is.
It's very silly. But in 1986, when there aren't like, there's not like a superhero movie coming out every other week, I guess you have to do something early on to show the audience that these aren't regular people. You know, they're capable of other things. Oh yeah, so in the scene where it's like, you know, you see McLeod meet the Moore Immortal, where they do the flashback to the party that they went to, which is like a Family Guy cutaway scene in the middle of this movie. Eventually they cut out the part where his assistant tells him to shoot McLeod in the back of the skull, and then he ends up shooting the assistant.
Dude, what was Family Guy is a good comparison, because that is so, and that is shortly after his wife has died. Like his wife dies, and he has the scene where he talks to the other immortal, and he's like, "Hey, let's go drinking," and then like the guy's not even in the flashback. it's McLeod shooting some other guys.
Remember that time?
Yeah, it's just the aftermath of the party.
Yeah,
which again is something that, like, you're right, that is a little jarring. But I've been so programmed, like, since 1992, watching the Highlander show, that's just like part of the format. That like it doesn't even faze me anymore, you know. But I also think that that bit that they cut is the best part of that scene. So it's like, why did you even keep that?
Right.
You know, previously. So in the scene in the church, the shot specifically where the Kurgan licks the priest's hand was cut out of the U.S. version.
More innocent times.
Like, I guess, you know. Okay, so most of the stuff beyond that is just a matter of them cutting out bits of different fights that they felt to be too extreme. Another example would be in the final fight scene, the Kurgan, when he gets his head decapitated. Originally, what you saw was just the line, and his head leaned back a little bit, and then it was just light shooting. They cut to McLeod, and they cut back, and it was just light shooting from out of his shoulders. Also, in the theatrical cut, and I remember this, you could see the wires holding McLeod up as he rises while all the effects are hitting.
Tremendous.
Because they just decided not to, like, spend the extra money since they had to cut it from, like, the previous version. Like, there wasn't all the polish on that version. They were like, screw it, no one's going to care at this point. But the biggest scene that was actually cut out, the only other thing that's really worth mentioning is they completely cut the World War II scene from the theatrical cut. So, like, yeah, the introduction of Rachel and the whole, like, introduction of It's a Kind of Magic, and that whole thing was just completely cut for the sake of timing, which is really funny because then in 2016, when it got put up onto HBO, it was not the theatrical cut, but that scene was still missing. It went up on HBO Max with that scene missing. And I did a little bit of research, but not enough where I really want to state this. But if you look into who was running HBO at that time and their political leanings, you might understand why that scene was cut from that version of the movie, especially with some other backlash HBO Max have been getting for some other things from specific groups of people who our YouTube version of this will get demonetized if we mention.
I will not read my note then from that scene because it was like, fuck yeah, he shot somebody. It was,
yeah.
That's a shame because it gets rid of one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and it also, I guess, did they keep the payoff though? So does he still give her that line as a goodbye?
Yeah.
And people are like,
that's
what?
still the goodbye line for that. So yeah, it's one of those things where like you meet her earlier in the movie and you get like a hint of that relationship, but no matter how skeezy I might have implied parts of it might have been previously, without having that middle part, like it takes for a very small scene, it removes a large amount of understanding about that character and his relationship to the world, which is one of the reasons why I was like, we're watching this specific version,
Yes,
not the theatrical cut.
That makes a huge difference.
We were just talking recently about, I can't remember which movie we were doing, Julio, but this is the year Jason Lives came out, and that wasn't as bad as New Blood in terms of like the MPAA just chopping shit, or like the studio having to chop shit because the MPAA was like, nope, NC-17, nope, X rating or whatever. It's just funny to think about these time periods like this movie, like just the little things you were talking about, the head falling off. They're like, all right, that's a deal breaker. Whereas now, short of like hardcore sex in a movie, you can get away with almost anything with an R rating.
Yeah, there was a time you could do anything to a woman in a movie, but once we start getting to 1986, the brakes start getting pumped a little harder.
There's one of the fights. I guess it's when he's fighting Clancy Brown is fighting the other immortal. I don't remember. He had like a long name, but then the dude with the machine gun joins them.
Yeah,
and I was wondering if that was one of those things where, like, for time they might have cut it, because it's pretty brutal. It gets pretty bloody, and then it leads into that bit where Clancy Brown steals a car from the two old people and like pulls the guy out, and then the grandma's still in the car. And he's like, "Daddy," and he's driving away. It was like, what happened?
They definitely cut a lot out of that, but it was another one where it was like little things like, so in the version we watched, he gets stabbed through and Clancy Brown lifts him up and you see a shot of the sword going through his back, where it's like they're clearly just doing the shot from killing Elektra, but with Clancy Brown as the Kurgan, which came out like a year and a half before this or something like that. But that shot's cut from the theatrical version, and there's a lot of other little moments where, like, you see Clancy Brown get shot, but you only see like maybe the first hit or two, and then we cut to the shot of him falling down. And so yeah, it's just cleaned up for like gratuity and the amount of damage done. But it doesn't really change like the nature of what's happening in the scene to any large degree. It always had that like weird tonal shift of like, this is nuts what's happening now, and now we're in a Looney Tunes cartoon. Yes. Where Clancy Brown is just hamming it up to 100%, just like, Mom! Like, as jarring as you felt that being, yes, I love this movie, but that is a very jarring transition.
So, Christopher Lambert, the entire second half, I had it in my head what you said, that he was learning his lines phonetically, he was learning English.
You talk funny, Nash. Where are you from? Lots of different places.
So in that end, like, from that angle, it's pretty impressive what he gets away with in the movie. But it also made me wonder, why would you cast him in the first place? Was he a name, and so that's how you get the funding? Because I know, like, and I brought it up before on the show, like Antonio Banderas in The Kings of Mambo, like it was the same thing. Like, he didn't speak English, so he learned his lines phonetically. But he was kind of like a known commodity from Spain, so they wanted to bring him to a movie in America. So that kind of, I see the logic there. Like, here, was he like a name, and this just kind of like made him bigger, or?
He was not a name, but a couple of years before, Canon released a movie called Tarzan, insert subtitle I can't remember here, where Lambert played Tarzan in that movie, and it made them a lot of money. And they thought that, like, he looked really good on a poster. And he was relatively excited and basically hid from the director as long as he could that he did not speak English because he really wanted to give. Even to the point where, like, they did, like, I think at one point they did, like, a call over the phone where they were reading lines from the script. And at that point, he had already learned the lines phonetically.
Wow.
but said that he wasn't great at English, so he had a translator there just to make sure he got all the details. It was basically he signed his contract and he was like, by the way, I don't actually speak English, but I'll know all my lines. And I mean, like, he'd done a couple other little roles and stuff, so it's not like he was like a completely unknown quantity outside of Tarzan, but no one in America knew who the hell he was. Like, even people who saw the Tarzan movie, I don't think they would have remembered him. I've seen that movie.
Yeah, he's got a decent amount of entries in his filmography before this, but yeah, it was just not like he wasn't Travolta in Pulp Fiction.
Right. Especially for a movie where they're like, let's cast a Frenchman to play a Scotsman, and then we'll cast a Scotsman to play an Egyptian, and just figure the rest out.
Clancy Brown. Just Clancy Brown. That's
right. He's supposed to technically be Russian, or like what we would now call Russian, but you know, there's nothing of that in there. He's just the Kurgan, and that's fine with me.
I liked Christopher Lambert when he showed up fairly recently. I mean, it's been a few years, but when the Coens did Hail Caesar, he has like, I think it's like one scene, maybe two scenes. He's a director. I think his story is I think he's a director that got Scarlett Johansson pregnant. Is that the?
I think that's right. I only watched that movie once, but
yeah,
I enjoyed it, and I remember him in it and being excited that Christopher Lambert was showing up in something.
That was my reaction. It was like, at the time, it was like, hey, Raiden, he's there, like in a Coen Brothers movie. And now I would go like, hey, he's a Highlander. So he's still, you know, and now he's like Christopher Lambert. I mean, I don't know, when you see him, this is for both of you, like when you see him, do you think that's Christopher Lambert? Do you think that's Raiden? Do you think that's Connor McLeod?
I always think Highlander. I forget all the time about Raiden. Like I've seen that Mortal Kombat movie, you know, 2 or 3 times, but I always forget that part of it. That's why you said it earlier. I was like, oh yeah. It's it is funny for this movie for, you know, Christopher Lambert. He's not, you know, I made that Travolta thing. He's not an actor he's not Samuel L. Jackson, someone who's like easily recognizable. And this movie also did not like make its money back, but over time, like you said, Julio, earlier, this movie is like penetrated pop culture. The line "there can be only one" is like, that's a line that's used a lot of times in jest, but it's because like it's impactful from this, and people know him as the Highlander, and a lot of people know him as Raiden as well. But like the point just being, this is another classic example of like Terminator came up earlier. Terminator made a fuck ton of money, and it was a game-changing movie. This was not, but in the time since its release, it's become like embedded in like the zeitgeist of action filmmaking, and made Christopher Lambert and to some extent, you know, Clancy Brown known. It's funny. It's a movie that didn't even make $15 million when it was released, and now it's fodder for jokes and, you know, Will Ferrell movies that make hundreds of millions of dollars and stuff like that. It's an example of, when it comes to art, sometimes you might have to be a little bit patient to get your just due.
You got to give it time.
Yeah. It's got to marinate.
And I don't know. When I was a kid, I definitely thought of him as the Highlander. And then as I got older, I began, especially just because I'd always been someone who loved movies. So, like, you know, probably by the time I was 10 or 11, it's like, no, that's the guy from Highlander. And by the time I was 13, he was Christopher Lambert. And I was like, that Beowulf movie sucks ass, but it is so much fun, dude. And again, yeah, it's one of those things where like it did not make money in the theaters at all. Like it was considered to be a failure, but it banked on home video. Like once it hit home video, like it did very well on home video. Which basically is what ended up getting the sequel greenlit and all that kind of stuff.
I was going to ask, how do you get a sequel when you don't make money? But that is because you have the secondary market that
used to.
Alex constantly reminds me. It's no longer out there.
Nope. Yeah. Not the way it used to be anyway.
Yeah. So, Alex, you haven't seen the sequel, right?
I was telling Cory, I've seen the one from like the early to like the right around 2000, somewhere between like 99 and 2001, I think it was released. But no, I have not seen the sequel.
Okay, so the one that you saw, they have Christopher Lambert, or were they like the next generation of Highlanders?
I thought it did. I'm gonna look it up here while we're
No, yeah, I'm pretty sure what he saw was Highlander Endgame. It's the movie that they made to, like, initially it was supposed to be the end of everything after the series was over. And again, Lambert comes back for the pilot of the series, and I think he makes 1 or 2 appearances later on, although those might be scenes from the pilot they reuse in flashbacks or something. I can't quite remember. But yeah, I think that's the one Alex saw.
Yeah, it's Endgame. I'm looking at the poster now, yeah.
Yeah, where it's basically him and the guy from the show teaming up on one last hurrah, and then you finally get like the, hey, what if these 2 guys who are friends and one of them's a mentor, they have to fight each other? Not necessarily because they're the last 2. Yeah, it's not because they're the last 2, but in that movie it's because neither one of them is strong enough to beat the bad guy, but if one of them absorbs the power of the other, then they will be.
Okay. Does it end with Lambert going like, I am
it is what it
Highlander? Does he snap his fingers at the end of Endgame? No? Okay. What a wasted opportunity.
Stop it.
No.
So Alex, what we're going to do, Cory had this idea. We're going to tell Cory what we think happens in the sequel. And he's going to tell us if we're right or wrong without going into much detail, because I think something that has become very apparent as we've been doing this is that we have to at some point watch the sequel and talk about it and do something about it. But still, like, you know, let's shoot some ideas. We know that Connery is back at some point somehow. Is it a flashback? Or is it like actual Connery? Or is he playing a different character? Is he playing a descendant of Ramirez? Can't be, because they can't have kids, right? So it can't be a descendant of Ramirez. Unless
he's his twin brother that he didn't know about.
I think more importantly, first of all, how do you walk back what happens at the end of this movie? He is God. He can read minds. Now he can have kids and he ages. So they literally like close the door on any potential sequel. So is
There's never supposed to be one.
Right, it makes sense. So does he just wake up one day and he's like, it's gone. I am immortal again.
Okay, well, I mean, I can definitely answer that without like spoiling too much of the movie, but do you have theory?
The
movie, give you the answer.
Highlander 2 opens with like Brenda coming out of the shower. He wakes up and she's coming out of the shower, and he's a little confused, and then they go into the kitchen and Ramirez is there making breakfast. It was all a dream. It wouldn't be Brenda, it would be Heather. Heather would be like, you know, coming out of the shower. It's just I don't know, Alex, how do you walk this back?
I don't know. My assumption is somehow there's like another immortal that he didn't know about or forgot about that's even more evil than Clancy Brown, and somehow is able to like redact his powers from him or some shit like that.
Oh,
all right, so what Alex just said is Highlander 3.
You went too far.
3, the final dimension with Mario Van Peebles, where him and like 2 other immortals were like trapped in a cave for hundreds of years, so they somehow missed the quickening, and somehow this mystical power that transmits between them didn't fucking realize there were 3 more guys trapped in a cave. And beyond that, it's just the same movie, but the love interest is replaced with an adopted son. So the answer to your question is, how do they walk this back in Highlander 2? Time travel from the past, where we explain, and this is all in the first 10 minutes of the movie, so this is not big spoilers, by the way. We explain that all immortals are criminals from an advanced species of humans in the past, who are then sent into the future, which to us is the past, and then they have to fight for the last one to have a chance at living as a free man again.
That's a
and
lot
then when
more.
They come back from the past into the present, there's a big explosion and McLeod comes out and he's young again, because when we start the movie he's about 102 years old. He tried to bring peace to the world by creating a big dome around it, but a corporation took over it and it became a dystopian sci-fi world.
If we're talking about time travel, then that explains everything. You can bring Heather back too. You can, you know, Connery, is he still with Brenda? No, because he's 100 and something. So did she die, or did he?
No, there's a new love interest who's almost a carbon copy of Brenda, except she's, instead of like actually being a cop or a journalist, she's actually like a resistance fighter. But that's only for her introduction, and after that, she just becomes Brenda. And Sean Connery's brought back because Christopher Lambert said he wouldn't do the movie without him. Because on this first movie, they became such good pals that for the rest of Sean Connery's life, anytime they saw each other in public, they referred to each other as McLeod and you old goat.
Amazing. That is heartwarming.
So that and like Sean Connery has star power.
Yeah.
Well, but no, he's literally come back. He comes back from McLeod wishing for it hard enough.
Well,
and then we have a really cute like 1990s suit up sequence where he gets a suit tailored for him.
Hell yeah.
Do we get to see them fight
and Michael
again?
Ironside is the villain, and he's fucking insane.
That is a high point. I'll watch Michael Ironside in anything. But do we get to see Sean Connery and McLeod fight again, like each other? I mean, or like, do I have that to look forward to?
Not like in a way that has any stakes. In the way of like, you know how like in a normal movie where two like macho dudes who haven't seen each other will meet and they'll give each other shit for a minute? You get like a minute of them fighting in that respect, but no, you don't really get much of that.
Okay, so it's still swords. We don't upgrade the weapons. All right. Well,
I mean, there are guns in that movie because it is like a sci-fi movie, but at the end of the day, it's going to be, you know, two guys with questionable haircuts and fashion sense fighting each other with swords.
That's what Highlander is. That's what the series is.
Keeping in mind, everything I'm telling you right now is based on the ultimate cut of Highlander 2. There are 4 different cuts. They are all completely different.
Jesus.
That's the one
that
we'll
is a
watch.
Story for another day.
Final question for either of you. If you know, no Highlander video game?
Not that I found. I mean, I'm sure there's someone who's modded some shit out there, but I couldn't, just based on a cursory Google search, find anything on a Highlander game.
Dude, Connor McLeod on the next Mortal Kombat is an unlockable character.
Check that. It does look like there was one on the Commodore 64 that was released in November of 1986 to lukewarm reviews.
So many of the licensed games back then, it was probably some other game that they just slapped Highlander on and changed the sprite a tiny bit to make it look like he had a trench coat or something.
All right. Well, it is time to give our scores. I think I know what Cory's is, just given all the love that's been gushing from him through this entire conversation. More curious about yours, Alex, and I am wavering on mine. So let's start with we'll go Cory, Alex, me. So Cory, you go your score for Highlander, which I don't know. I mean, you know, whichever type of scale you want to do. Because Alex does letters, I do stars.
I would say that, like, in terms of stars, it'd probably be about 4 stars. Because it's not a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination. Like, there are definitely some flaws in it. It's definitely a movie that was made for like a decent budget, but you can see the seams in places for sure. You know, it's also very much a product of its time. But I think it's also a movie that like tells a story that manages to engage its audience. Like, I show this movie to so many people who are so much younger than me. Like my roommate Taylor, I showed it to her like a year and a half ago, and she's like 23 or 24, and she had a lot of fun with it. And so I feel like despite its flaws, it is a movie that, while it might not be the deepest or the best movie ever made, it does a lot of really interesting things. It has a lot of beautiful cinematography, and it tells a story that's engaging enough for you to invest in it, but never takes itself so seriously that you can't have fun. And in terms of a number, I would say like, I don't know, 75-80%, somewhere in there.
All right. Fresh tomato. Alex, your turn.
I would give this a B-. I think it's extremely ambitious, overly so at points, I think. And, you know, the acting varies greatly, but it's very entertaining. And also it has aged well in the sense of like, we used to make movies like this. Like, you know, there's on location filming, real action sequences, you know, and I know it's just paper mache and plastic heads rolling and shit, but it's still like effort that someone put into it. And, Yeah, I think my main knock would be that it overly ambitious is what I said. It sometimes I think it reached a bit too far, but when it settles into its zone, it's a very, very fun 80s action movie.
I was hoping hearing you talk about it, both of you would help me make a decision. I'm between 3 and 3.5 stars. I think that Connery and those couple moments that we singled out from the second half, they kick it up to 3.5 just because it works so well. I forgot to mention the one other thing that kind of annoyed me was that the climatic battle, he just wins. And again, I know that's just that's how the movie is, but it's not, unless I missed it, there is not specific strategy that gets him the win. It's like, well, they're fighting, and then it's time for the fight to end. So, well, but Clancy Brown has been fucking unstoppable the entire movie.
Rope-a-dope, baby. You let him tire him out.
That's what happened.
Tire himself out, and then you hit him with it. Yeah.
Yeah. All the previous attacks have also been surprise attacks, where at this point Connor's done with his BS. So you're right.
It was
Don't
Brenda.
Get me wrong. It was Brenda. The love of a good woman who was under 50. That's what did it.
Well, no, because she saves him, right? He's on the floor. He's about to die. She saves him.
Yeah.
And 5 seconds later, he's quipping.
She hits home dude with the pipe.
Yeah.
Yeah. She hits home dude with the pipe, And again, for as little as Brenda has to do in the movie, I will at least give her, again, I think I might have mentioned to you, she has more agency than Mary Jane. She puts up a fight and tries to help out in every time that there is danger, So yeah, I'll give you that. It's not just that she's under 50 and hot and has weird 80s sex. It's there's more to it.
Everybody was having weird 80s sex back then. All right, well, 3.5, B-, 4 stars, fresh tomato in the 80s. It's all good for Highlander, and it potentially just goes downhill from here. So at some point, we'll get together and we're gonna talk about Highlander 2. We'll probably do a similar video, unless Cory has other ideas. But I feel like we've done enough here where it just can't end. And I do need to watch Highlander 2, but I kind of get the feeling that I'm only going to watch it once. So when I watch it, it has to count. It has to be content. It can't just be wasted away. So you guys have that to look forward to. Cory, this is going to go on our channel and yours. So I don't know if it even makes sense for you to say something about your channel, but just go ahead and say something about your channel just in case.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, my channel is just Nerd Scum with an underdash in between. And I cover a lot of different comic books and movies and stuff like that. And by the time this comes out, it'll already be out. I've done a crossover about the Crow movie with Joe Skeet's show. So yeah, check out my channel if you like. I've got a lot of fun stuff going on over there, as well as updates on all the filmmaking stuff that I do with Little Spark Films and Mark Beal and all the other folks that I'm working with.
Yeah, it's you have a lot of stuff there. It's a constant output of stuff on your channel. You put a lot of people to shame. But that's it. That was Highlander with special guest star Nerd Scum Cory Ari. Alex and I have completed another mission as we close down our 10th year. This video ideally will go up on our final week of October, and that will be part of our 10th year anniversary celebration. Good stuff. Connor McLeod would be proud. He would say, let's go drinking instead of killing each other. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to both channels if you haven't already. Comment with your favorite Highlander movie and tell us what we got wrong or right. And we'll talk to you again soon.
That summer of 19